It's 7:15 on a Tuesday morning, and Eli is 14 years old, standing at the edge of the private school parking lot with his backpack slung over one shoulder, watching his father get out of a car that's been in the family for 11 years, a small dent in the rear bumper nobody's ever bothered to fix. A luxury SUV pulls into the space beside them, brand new, still smelling like the dealership. A classmate's father steps out wearing a watch that costs more than the family car, a phone Eli's seen advertised but never held, clothes that look like they were pressed an hour ago. Eli looks at the SUV, then at his own father's scratched door panel. "Dad," he says, "why don't we buy a better car?" His father doesn't answer right away. He locks the door, an old habit from an old car that doesn't really need locking. He looks at the SUV once, unbothered, almost amused. Then he says the only thing he'll say about it all morning. "Because I don't need anyone to know what I can afford." Cut to 20 years later. Eli is sitting at a crowded family dinner table, the kind with too many conversations happening at once. Mortgages and promotions and somebody's upcoming trip to Portugal. Someone finally turns to him, the quiet one at the end of the table, and asks the question everyone eventually asks. "So what do you actually do these days?" Eli smiles. "Nothing," he says. A pause. "Then I've been retired for 6 years. Nobody at the table laughs because nobody's sure yet whether they're supposed to. That's where this story actually starts. 20 years earlier than the dinner, and about 40 minutes after the parking lot, in the passenger seat of that same old car, Eli still turning his father's sentence over in his head without understanding it yet. It would take him most of his 20s to understand it. It would take the whole rest of his life to fully live by it. The first rule Eli ever learned, without anyone calling it a rule, was that spending to prove something and spending because you actually wanted something were two completely different transactions wearing the same clothes. He didn't figure this out from a lecture. He figured it out slowly, in his early 20s, watching his friends trade up cars the way other people trade up phones. His roommate leased something sleek, and German the same month Eli kept driving the compact sedan he'd bought, used at 19. One hubcap, slightly the wrong shade from a replacement he'd found secondhand. Someone made a joke about it at a party once, gently, the way friends do, asking if the car had a first name yet. Eli laughed along and didn't think about it again until he got home that night and actually looked at what the difference was, not the car itself. The $400 a month his roommate now owed somebody every single month for the privilege of a nicer badge on the hood. A payment that would still be leaving his account long after the new car smell had faded into just another commute. Eli didn't lecture anyone about it. He didn't bring it up again, didn't feel the need to explain himself to a room that hadn't asked. He just quietly opened a brokerage account that same week and started sending that same rough amount somewhere else every month instead, into something with no badge on it at all. Nothing anyone at that party would ever be able to see or comment on. Nobody at the party ever knew. That was sort of the point. Looking wealthy and becoming wealthy, it turned out, were two entirely different games being played on the exact same field, with the exact same paychecks, and almost nobody around him seemed to notice they weren't actually playing the same one. The second rule showed up a few years later, once Eli's income had grown enough that the obvious move would have been a bigger apartment, a nicer commute, the usual upgrades that arrive right on schedule with a raise like they're contractually owed. Instead, Eli did something almost nobody around him was doing. He started buying back pieces of his own time, on purpose, one decision at a time. He paid a little extra to live closer to work and cut an hour off his commute, not because the apartment itself was better, not because it photographed well, but because that hour, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, was worth more to him than the extra square footage would ever have been. He started paying someone to handle the parts of adult life that quietly ate hours without ever asking to be admired for how efficiently he handled all of it himself, the way some of his friends seemed to need people to notice. His weekends got quieter, less rushing between errands stacked 3 deep, more actual unclaimed mornings, more real conversations with his parents that weren't squeezed between 2 other obligations and a phone buzzing on the table. Old money, he was starting to realize, was never really about being cheap. It was about being deliberate, spending freely and without guilt on the small handful of things that genuinely bought back hours, and refusing almost everything else on offer, no matter how good it looked on someone else's feed that week. The third rule was the one that turned the whole thing quiet. By his early 30s, Eli had actually accumulated something real. Not a fortune, but a number that would have surprised almost everyone who knew him. And almost nobody who knew him actually knew it. His friends assumed he was doing fine, comfortable, nothing more specific than that. His parents thought he was doing well for himself in the vague way parents think that about a kid with a steady job and a clean apartment. He never posted a screenshot of an account balance. He never mentioned a return, a gain, a good year, even when a good year would have been a perfectly reasonable thing to mention out loud. There's a dinner that sticks with him from around that time. A cousin complaining loudly about being broke that month, dramatic about it in the way that gets everyone at the table nodding along sympathetically, listing off exactly what had to get cut from the budget this time. Eli listened along with everyone else, nodded in the right places, and quietly picked up the check at the end without making anything of it, sliding his card across before anyone could argue, without a single person at that table having the faintest idea that he could have covered the whole restaurant twice over without noticing the dent it left in anything. Nobody found out. He never wanted them to. It wasn't shame, and it wasn't a performance of humility either. It simply never occurred to him that anyone needed to know. Old money, he was learning, doesn't announce itself. It just quietly pays for dinner and lets the conversation move on to something else entirely. The fourth rule is the one that actually built the whole thing underneath all the others, and it's the one nobody ever really explains properly. Eli's salary doubled over about 6 years. Then it very nearly tripled from where he'd started. And here's the part that would have surprised his 14-year-old self standing in that parking lot. His lifestyle didn't triple with it. It barely moved at all. The gap between what came in and what he actually needed to live on kept getting wider every single year, and that gap, quietly, without any single dramatic decision behind it, became the entire engine of everything that happened afterward. He'd meet people making close to what he made, sometimes considerably more, who needed nearly every dollar of it just to keep their current life running, which meant they needed an enormous pile of money before they could ever consider stepping away from a paycheck. Someone earning a comfortable 6-figure salary but spending almost all of it might need several $1,000,000 sitting in accounts before that income could ever be replaced. Someone earning less, but needing dramatically less, could get there on a fraction of that number, sometimes a decade or two sooner, purely because the gap was wider from the very beginning. Eli started to understand, slowly, and then all at once, that the actual goal was never to earn the most money physically possible. It was to need the least while quietly building the most, which sounds almost too simple to be the whole answer, and somehow was anyway. The fifth rule is the one that changes the shape of an entire life, and it's the hardest one to actually live by, because everyone around you is playing a different, shorter game, often without realizing it's even a choice. Most people, understandably, are asking themselves what they want this particular year, this particular season, this particular version of their life right now, today, before the feeling passes. Eli started asking a different, quieter question instead, one that never made for good conversation at a party. What is this decision going to look like in 20 years? At 20, that meant his very first real investment. Small, unglamorous, easy to forget about, the kind of amount that wouldn't have impressed anyone if he'd mentioned it out loud, which is exactly why he never did. At 25, it meant turning down lifestyle upgrades that would have been completely reasonable and expected, while friends around him were buying bigger places and better cars on schedule with their raises, each purchase arriving right on cue like a subscription nobody remembered signing up for. At 30, it meant watching his modest portfolio actually start compounding into something that moved on its own, slowly, quietly, without him doing anything dramatic to it, checking it maybe once a season instead of once a week. At 35, most of his friends were closing on bigger houses, hosting housewarmings with better wine than Eli would have brought himself, and Eli was still in the same modest place, still driving something unremarkable, and by then it had stopped feeling like sacrifice and started feeling like the plan working exactly as intended, the way a slow fuse is supposed to feel right before it finally catches. By 40, something had genuinely shifted. His investments, in a given year, were sometimes earning more than his actual paycheck brought in, quietly, in the background, without a single headline moment attached to any of it, no milestone anyone threw a party for. And somewhere not long after that, he simply didn't need the job anymore. Not because he'd become spectacularly rich overnight, Not because of one lucky break or one bold swing. Because he'd spent 20 years letting a gap between earning and needing do something that no single decision, however dramatic, ever could have done on its own. Here's the part of the story that changes how everything before it actually reads. Eli's father was never secretly wealthy. There was no hidden fortune behind that scratched bumper, no quiet inheritance nobody talked about at holidays. He simply understood, decades before Eli did, that money, which has to be seen, isn't really money that's being kept. The old car in that parking lot wasn't a financial limitation. It was a decision, made deliberately, by a man who'd figured out the whole 5-rule system on his own, without ever once calling it a system, long before his son was old enough to ask why the neighbor's car looked so much better than theirs. Suddenly, the whole opening scene means something completely different. That wasn't a family that couldn't afford the SUV. That was a family that had simply decided, a long time before Eli was born, not to let a vehicle make that particular decision for them. The second half of this story was never really about the money itself, and Eli would tell you that himself if you asked him at the dinner table today. It was about what all 5 rules quietly bought him underneath the numbers, things no statement has ever had a line item for. Mornings without an alarm going off on someone else's schedule, waking up on his own terms and lying there a minute longer just because he can. Actual unhurried time with his parents while they're both still around to spend it with weekday afternoons other people his age can only get to on a stolen sick day. The freedom to book a flight without doing frantic mental math first, without quietly checking a balance before hitting confirm. The ability to help a family member through a rough financial stretch without a single moment of private panic about what it would cost him personally. Writing the check and meaning the part where he says, "Don't worry about it." The freedom to walk away from a bad opportunity, a bad job offer, a bad deal, simply because he could afford to say no and mean it, without needing the money badly enough to talk himself into something he already knew was wrong. A whole life, slowly, that stopped depending on anyone else's approval to feel complete, that stopped needing an audience at all. None of that shows up on a bank statement. All of it came directly from 5 quiet decisions that started in a parking lot he didn't understand yet, made by a 14-year-old who just wanted a better car. Which brings the story back to that dinner table, the one from the very beginning, years further along now. The same people who once gently teased him about the used car and the modest apartment are the ones now anxiously comparing retirement account numbers across the table, doing math out loud between bites, worrying together about whether they'll have enough saved by 65, trading spreadsheet formulas like recipes. Someone finally turns to Eli, half joking, and asks when exactly he's planning on retiring himself, expecting some vague answer about someday. He pauses just long enough for it to register as a real answer instead of a joke. "I already did," he says. For a second, half the table assumes he's kidding, waiting for the punchline that doesn't come. He isn't kidding. There was no announcement when it actually happened. No email sent around, no farewell party with a sheet cake and a card everyone signed, no dramatic post anywhere online for anyone to like or comment on. Just one completely ordinary Tuesday morning, years earlier, when the number sitting quietly in his accounts finally crossed the point where his time belonged entirely to him, instead of to whoever happened to be signing his paycheck that particular week, and he simply didn't set an alarm the next day, and then didn't set one the day after that either, and eventually stopped noticing he'd stopped. The boy who once stood in a parking lot staring at a stranger's SUV understands his father's sentence completely now, in a way no explanation could have given him at 14. No matter how patiently it had been offered. It was never really about refusing nice things on principle, never about being cheap or austere or quietly proud of driving something old past the point anyone else would have. It was always about refusing to let nice things quietly decide what the rest of his life would be worth, one upgrade at a time, until the upgrades were the whole life. And if you ask Eli today what the whole thing was actually for, he won't talk about net worth or account balances or any specific number at all. He'll tell you he spent close to 2 decades not trying to become the richest person at any table he ever sat at, not competing with anyone, not keeping score against a single person in that dining room. He was trying to become the only person at that table who genuinely owned the one thing everyone else was still quietly working overtime to buy back for themselves: his own time, sitting entirely in his own hands, unclaimed by any calendar, unowed to any employer, with nobody else's schedule attached to it anymore. That was always the actual inheritance, passed down in a parking lot on a Tuesday morning, and he's still spending it, slowly, on purpose, one ordinary, unhurried day at a time.